Yes, Councilmember Schipske.
Hey, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank the city attorney for coming back with the changes that were requested. I would like to make a pitch to my colleagues about the distance for schools. Under the Federal No Child Left Behind Act, the drug-free zones are 1,000 feet. And the school district had asked for 1,500 feet, but because of the federal requirements they have for a drug-free zone, if we could go back and make it 1,000 feet from every school, that would help them be consistent. I think it would help us be consistent, because I don't quite understand why we would limit it, from a kindergarten or a middle school and then extend it for a high school. So I would ask if my colleagues would entertain that we be consistent with the Federal No Child Left Behind Act that requires schools to have a 1,000-foot drug-free zone, so that
Keep high schools at 1,500?
we could keep high schools at 1,500 if we want, but, I think, the high school is obviously the big focus, but the rest of the schools, too. That would help be consistent. We didn't do the 1,500 for all schools, but I think it would help the schools be consistent with their drug-free zones. Can we add that as an amendment?
Councilmember Gabelich.
Well,
just
I'm sorry,
a
hold on.
comment.
Excuse me, hold on.
Well, I have another question.
I'm sorry. Let me let her finish.
So I would like, if we could do that. But I'd like to ask the city attorney, what impact did the court ruling last week or the week before have
None whatsoever.
in LA County?
Not relevant to these issues. No.
Pardon?
Not relevant to these. Are you talking about the Supreme Court decision or the trial court decision?
The trial court decision.
The trial court decision, I think, is consistent with the ordinance that we're going to pass. The important consideration is that we're not permitting for-profit sales of medical marijuana.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Councilmember Gabelich.
Gerrie, if you want to make that change, then you've just changed everything on this map. And my thoughts are the reason that I see for having the buffer zones, significant distance from the high schools in particular, is because these may be the young people that are actually trying to, work their way in there as possible patients. And in many cases, they probably are successful. But an elementary school child or a preschool child, that is not going to happen. So are we going to address this as are you looking at it as a criminal activity, or are you looking at it as medicine?
Go ahead.
So, I think that we talked about this, and this is what we asked for the last time. I think we should try our very best to stay as close as we can to what we agreed upon. And I just think that changing the distance to that then pushes it all in just a very few parts of the city. And if we're going to talk about, which I know is going to come up, limiting the growth to being within the city of Long Beach, then we're really restricting it even more.
Can I respond, Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead.
There are significant changes. Actually, we did not agree to this. It was suggested to the city attorney to write these things, and that's what the first reading of the ordinance is, to come back with the changes. But I do think we have a disservice to parents and to the school system, where they are required to have a drug-free zone, and you may want to call this medicine, but under federal law it is not medicine, and I think we have to respect the fact that schools are under that. I think it does send kind of a curious message that, and I know what you're saying, you think the kids are, the high school kids are going to get into it, but middle school kids too.
No.
Well, whatever. But the point is, I think in due deference, I think to the school district, they did ask this. We're not doing the 1,500 feet for all schools, but as proposed here, you've removed all playgrounds, licensed child care facilities, parks, and other things. So I think in many ways this is a rather generous thing. If we go back and put the schools back in for the 1,000, the 1,500 for the high schools, I think we're sending a message that we are trying to acknowledge that they do have that right to have those drug-free zones, no matter what you want to call those drugs.
Well, then I would, and we're not talking about federal law here either. We're operating under the state of California. So back to that, what this is... what this is going to do is then, do you want to send it back again and have it come back and we can examine what that map looks like? Or maybe, Mr. Shannon, you have a copy of what that looks like? Because, again, it eliminates all of the areas, and at the recommendation of our police department, I am now siding with having it grown within the city limits. And so then we're restricting it even more, and quite frankly, I have another couple of concerns that I have about where they're going to grow the product, if you will. So, I would ask you to not try to influence us to make that very significant change, and see how it goes. Actually, most of the schools are also within residential areas, and so they're going to be covered.
All right.
Because of that.
If somebody wants to do it, we'll just
I
make an amendment.
have a couple of other changes or recommendations I'd like to make. Would this be the appropriate time to do it?
Go right ahead.
Okay, well, first I'd like to have included in the ordinance that it would be a limit to a maximum of 3 per district. And I would like to also change, it lists in here that there would be, that the patients would be limited to only being allowed to be the member of one collective, and I would like to eliminate that completely. No, please. And then I would like to say that any collective that's located within a commercial retail corridor, that they are limited to no more than 2,000 square feet, and that satellite locations would then have to be used, because I have to tell you, let me just give you an example of what would be a nightmare for Bixby Knolls. The Expo Furniture Building, over 5,000 square feet, they could grow a forest in there, and the community would be furious. We all have those large buildings, and I just think that if you're talking about letting them be in commercial corridors, that they have to limit the on-site location, the collective location, at 2,000 square feet, and that's my recommendation, and they can use satellite locations for any additional growing room that they need.
Okay, Councilmember Uranda.